Dark Souls 3 is the final in the trilogy of Souls games. I've spent around 30-ish hours playing through this lovely game, and then spent even more time watching and listening to videos of other people sharing their opinions on Dark Souls 3. Some of them I agree with, and some of them I very much do not agree with. I hear lots of people bitch about Dark Souls 3, and I'm here to say that I think it is the best one in the series, and that you are wrong about Dark Souls 3. I've played almost every Souls game and beaten them, besides Sekiro, and I've never actually played Demon Souls yet. Souls games are some of my favorite games of all time. I love them to death, and I've criticized them a lot too. That's usually how it goes. You shit on things you love in hopes that they change and get better in the future, and I'm happy to report that FromSoft has taken what they've learned from Dark Souls 1 and 2 and Bloodborne and made something great. I have played through Bloodborne and beaten it, but I haven't done so recently or done a review on it yet. I'm going to, but for the sake of this video, I will mostly be comparing and pulling from Dark Souls 1 and 2 with a little bit from Bloodborne. And yes, I understand that Dark Souls 3 has taken a lot of inspiration from Bloodborne. After going through lots of different videos and hearing all the complaints, I need to state that lots of people actually really like Dark Souls 3. All I'm here to argue is the faults that they find with the game are actually good additions or changes, especially for new players and average fans of the Souls series like myself. Once again, I love Souls games and I would consider myself pretty good at them. I still definitely fall in the average category as far as skills go though. I didn't really have any trouble getting through Dark Souls 3. There were a few bosses that I had to take breaks and come back to, or skip and come back later, but for the most part, all the required content I was able to breeze through. The only two bosses I didn't beat this time around were the Nameless King, which I feel like I probably could beat him. I'm just burnt out from playing the game right now. I did beat him with the summons. And then the other one is Dark Eater Midir from the DLC, which is just a gauntlet of patience and precision. This dragon has so much health, and honestly, I can't be bothered to force myself to a long endurance fight. Even though I didn't beat these two, I still feel very satisfied with my time with Dark Souls 3, and like I said, it was kind of a breeze. That being said, when I first played Dark Souls 3 back in 2017, that was a nightmare. I would get stuck on almost every boss. The Crystal Sage banged me. The Abyss Watchers banged me. The Dancer of the Boreal Valley super banged me to the point to where I wanted to commit crimes. Of course, I've gotten better with Souls games since then, thankfully, but at the time, I was the average player who had dabbed in Souls games, but was still learning how to play. And I would consider Dark Souls 3 the easiest for new players. This is where all my points stem from, the new player perspective. I love Dark Souls, and when you enjoy something a lot, you ask your buddies about the things you love in hopes that they love them too, or will at least try them. I feel like for the most part, my friend group has tried more games than I have, so I'm usually the one who is playing catch up and trying new or different games. One of my friends who goes by the gamer tag of Can't Stop Playing COD has tried playing Dark Souls 1 several different times, with the latest time being the farthest he had gotten. He had over 50 hours in the game and got to Ornstein and Smo. He was stuck and quit, which I don't blame him. He's told me many times why he really wants to like the game but just can't bring himself to play it again. Quote, "The gamers are too hard and I don't know where to go." One of my biggest issues with Dark Souls over the years is there really is no blunt tutorial on how to play the game. You have to pay attention to world details on where to go and die over and over again to learn how to play. Listen, this type of game design I really like, and the more video games I've played over the years, I've really grown to appreciate the risks the Souls games have taken. Dark Souls 1 is a masterclass in level design and teaching a player how to play without a tutorial. But most new and casual gamers will not figure this out and need a freaking tutorial to teach them how to play. Dark Souls 1 has a tutorial area with some text boxes that teach you basic moves like hitting and blocking, but the game doesn't teach you the main mechanic of all Souls games going forward, dodge rolling, and how it is better than blocking and you should get good at it. Most people will assume that if a bad guy's sword touches them, it will hurt. But in Dark Souls, it's almost better to dodge right at an enemy swing and it will phase through you. Once again, I love how Dark Souls 1 goes about teaching players, but most casual players will be on the struggle bus for hours trying to get the hang of combat. Firelink Shrine is another masterclass in giving players options, but gently guiding them in the direction that the devs want them to go by using enemy placements. You can go left to tough skeletons and die. You could take an elevator down and find enemies you can't even hurt, and die. You go right and you see enemies that you fought in the tutorial, maybe you should go that way. I love Dark Souls 1's world design. It is amazing, but it is tough to argue that it is not beginner friendly. Unless you watch a ton of videos on how to play Dark Souls, you will undoubtedly get stuck and or lost at some point. Going back to what Call of Duty guys said about never knowing where to go. Dark Souls 1 is not linear. I mean, it kind of is because there are areas you have to go to at some point to progress the game, but you have options right from the beginning. Dark Souls 3, however, gets dunked on for its world design and how it is linear and not open like the first game. But, like, does it have to be? In my Dark Souls 2 video, I complained about the world design and how it wasn't as good as Dark Souls 1. But after playing Dark Souls 3, I've come to the conclusion that a linear design isn't a bad thing at all. I know from my first playthrough of Dark Souls 1, I had to use a walkthrough. I'm just not that good at video games. But in Dark Souls 3, you can get to almost every area in this game without one because it's more linear. Most of the time, you've got a single path to take that will branch into two at some point. You can go to either area at that time, but will have to come back and take the other path to progress the game. Doing a more linear design is the best thing that the devs could have done for new players and average Souls players. You can't get lost. Most areas are still fairly big and allow for exploration, and some areas are well crafted with shortcuts that still give you that aha moment of realizing where you are. It's more scaled down from Dark Souls 1, but doesn't make it any less enjoyable. I also want to mention that this game is beautiful. Areas and backgrounds look incredible, and there are so many times when you are entering a new area or you walk through a gate with a perfect frame of a skybox or castle for you to just gush over. Yeah, the level design isn't open or as connected as Dark Souls 1, but it doesn't have to be. I don't know if this is a quote from Miyazaki himself, but on the wiki someone is quoted saying, "The game's level design was created to become more of another enemy the player must face." In Dark Souls 1, you feel that. Figuring out where to go is half the battle. In Dark Souls 3, they just made that enemy more doable for players. I understand where lots of experienced players of the series are coming from when they talk about the level design in 2 and 3, because Dark Souls 1 is just a magical experience in that aspect. But I really want more people to play these games, and it's just a tough sell because I know how hard they are. There's a YouTuber called Manly Reviews that put it best.
Many veterans of the series will actually encourage new players to go in completely blind, and I think that's kind of a dickhead mentality. While I think people should avoid spoilers, I think every copy of the game should come with at least 3 to 4 older brothers that can educate you on just some of the more hidden mechanics of the game. Like the carry weight, for example, which can completely alter the entire fundamental way the game is played, and it's never mentioned at all once. Thanks, game. Great design.
This leads to the next part of Call of Duty Guy's statement. The gamers are too tough. Nobody is going to argue that Souls games aren't hard or meant to be hard. How many times have you heard someone say, that is the Dark Souls of blank? That is the Dark Souls of platformers. That's the Dark Souls of card games. That's the Dark Souls of life. They are hard, and if you're a new player, Dark Souls 3 is going to be hard. Even if you aren't new to the series, you can still struggle with this game. But I still think it's the easiest of the 3. That is another complaint I've heard others talk about online. Dark Souls 3 is too easy. I disagree with this completely. Not the fact that it is easy, but that is a bad thing. The difficulty balance and scaling in Dark Souls 3 is really good in my opinion, and you never feel like from area to area you need to go grind souls just so you feel adequate to take on a certain level. Going back to the level design on how it's linear with split paths. Those paths you can take at either time will feel very doable and not like one is harder than the other because the scaling is really good. Both areas are about the same as far as difficulty goes, so you can do either, and when you come back to head to the next area, you don't feel like you're super broken and dunking on everything in that area. I don't know about you, but for me, I love it when my character is super powerful and when I'm the one dunking on enemies. It feels good. The thing is though, with all Souls games, is it doesn't matter how powerful you get, you can still get clapped by common enemies. Dark Souls 3 gives the player lots of tools to help them overcome said obstacles. If you're stuck on bosses, you can summon players or NPCs to assist you. You get so many consumables to help you get through areas or bosses. If you're sick of getting poisoned, use consumables. You aren't doing enough damage to enemies, use consumables. You want to attack from far away, use throwables. That is one thing I'm trying to get better at in games in general, is using more of my consumables, especially in Souls games, because they give you so many and lots of times I either forget to use them or my dumb brain plays the "what if I need it in the future" card. Just use them. you can always buy more down the road. For newer or casual players, Dark Souls 3 will be a challenge, but the devs do a really good job of guiding the players and not making challenges impossible or unfair. Most who have played Dark Souls 2, especially Scholar of the First Sin version, that game is riddled with unfairness. But I've already bitched about the game enough, you can check that out here. Now for the Got Good players that complain that it's too easy for them. I've heard some really silly arguments, and I think the most absurd being that the game gives you too much healing. You can get up to 15 Estus flasks in this game, which basically means you get around 15 or so mistakes before you die. That's assuming that you can get away far enough to press the button and heal. That is also my point here. You don't have to press the button, or even upgrade your Estus in the first place. If you think it's too easy, just stick with the 3 Estus the game gives you in the beginning. It's silly to me when I hear gamers say that games are too easy for them and they want it harder. I want my game so hard I get hemorrhoids. Really, dude? You want hemorrhoids? Most games out there that don't have difficulty sliders are fairly easy to get through, so what do people do? Self-imposed challenges. In Zelda games, people do 3-heart challenges. In Pokemon, people do Nuzlocke challenges. If Dark Souls 3 is so easy, do 3 Estus challenge, or 0 deaths challenge, or literally hit the skill ceiling of the entire game and do a no-hit run. You can do that, do all 3 Souls games no-hit run. If you are still so good and the games are just too easy for you, go get addicted to meth and see if you can break that habit.
Drug addicts are weak. I'm currently developing an addiction to methamphetamines just so I can show everyone how easy it is to quit. Wow.
Making the game butthole hard just for you because you are so good at it is silly, especially where there aren't difficulty sliders. Souls games are hard enough even for players who have played other Souls games. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which has been something that has bothered me for a very long time when it comes to the Souls community, specifically the gatekeepers. Everyone has heard the phrase, get good. Don't you want more people to play the games you like so they can like them alongside you? Instead of just telling everyone that struggles with these games to get good or go play a baby game, why not try to help them, guide them, and turn them into a sunbro? I'm not saying it's your job to teach every new player how to play Dark Souls, because there are plenty of videos out there on how to play, but I feel like there's some people in the community that could do a better job of welcoming and helping new players. I really love Dark Souls and would love the community to be less toxic, and I don't even think Dark Souls is that bad of a community comparatively. I mean, there are way worse communities that gatekeep their games way harder just by being dicks and not wanting new players to even dip their toes in. No, there should not be an easy mode because that defeats the purpose, story, themes, and gameplay of Souls games. But they should not be harder just to cater to the Dark Souls gatekeepers. Once again, I don't think the Dark Souls community is that bad. It's just a little frustrating for me when I talk about Dark Souls to my friends, and all they know about the games is they are really hard and full of get good gatekeepers. At the end of the day, most people's issues with Dark Souls 3 are just nitpicks, and from what I gather, most really love this game. The bosses are sick, the level design and architecture is awesome, the weapons are cool, and the gameplay is pure. I also don't think this game is perfect. I have my nitpicks with it, the biggest being I have to warp back to Firelink anytime I want to level up. Why? I've also played Elden Ring, and I believe that to be peak FromSoft at this point, perfecting the Souls genre in my opinion, with Dark Souls 3 being the first steps in that direction. Dark Souls 3 may be the easiest Souls game I've played this far, and I think that's a fantastic thing. It's an easier sell to new players, which paid off, by the way, selling 3 million in the first 2 months and 10 million by 2020. And it means I've gotten better at Souls games, especially compared to my first playthrough of Dark Souls 3. That's it. Those are my opinions on Dark Souls 3. The Souls gatekeepers can publicly execute me in the comments. Let me know if you agree with my opinions or if I'm just bad and should get good. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep it rad.